To declare open this council meeting, Colac Otway Shire Council on 24th of June 2023. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decisions to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. Amen. I'd like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, their elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. Please be advised that this meeting is recorded and live streamed with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practicable. By participating in open meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of the information they share at the meeting, including any personal and/or sensitive information. I would like, before we move on, just to acknowledge the passing of former Councillor of Colac Otway Shire, Mr Jeff Higgins, passed away earlier this month. We send our condolences to Mr Higgins. I knew Jeff before I was on council, but I didn't have the privilege of working with him. But I'm just wondering, Councillor Hart, I think you did some work with Mr Higgins, and whether you wanted to make any comment about his service.
Yes, if I may, Mayor, and I'd also like to join and offer my condolences to Jeff Higgins' family and friends. Jeff Higgins was first elected to council in November 2004 and served as a councillor until December 2007. He was then elected for a second term from November 2008 until October 2012, and I served on council with him for that second period. I found Councillor Higgins to be refreshing in his direct nature and ability to cut through to what was important. In remembering Councillor Higgins, we need to acknowledge what occurred in December 2007 to him and to two other Colac Otway Shire councillors. Around that time, there was a proposal to rezone land on a coastal floodplain near Apollo Bay to allow the construction of houses on what is a recognised coastal floodplain. This rezoning process proceeded despite the risk to future homeowners and the legal risk to council. Councillor Higgins and two other councillors deprived the council of a quorum by leaving the meeting which was set to approve the rezoning. This was due to concerns about building houses on the coastal floodplain. As a result, they were sacked quite unfairly by the local government minister in December 2007. The councillors, including Councillor Higgins, were well supported by the community for their strong actions and reinstated at the 2008 council election less than a year later. By then, the previous council had approved the rezoning and it was with the planning minister awaiting his signature of approval. In 2009, the planning minister took what is an unusual but sensible step of rejecting the rezoning that had been approved by council so that the houses could not be built on the coastal floodplain. So Jeff Higgins and two other councillors were unfairly sacked by the local government minister in December 2007. They were reinstated by the community less than a year later. And Jeff Higgins and the others had their actions vindicated when the planning minister stopped the rezoning. Can you imagine what would have happened if those houses had been built on the coastal floodplain? A book's been written about this episode. Jeff Higgins and the other two Colac Otway councillors are duly acknowledged in that book. The book is available free as an e-book. It is called Great Ocean Gulf. That's GULF, by John Spencer, who was a resident in the area. Mr Higgins' family can be proud of the significant contribution he made, especially at that difficult time in this council's history.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. I note that all 7 councillors are present, with Councillor Hanson is attending by video conference in accordance with sub-rule 75.1 and 75.2 of Councillors' Governance Rules. Moving on to question time, Colac Otway Shire Council encourages community input and integral to this is the opportunity provided to ask questions at council meetings. A maximum of 30 minutes is allowed for question time at council meetings. Community members wishing to ask questions of council by video conferencing were requested to register their intention before 5 p.m. on Monday the 26th of June 2023. No requests were received. I've received questions in writing from James Judd, Pam Cuthbertson, Jeff Cook, Maud Berry, Marina Lewis, Susan Langridge and Prabha Cuddy. These questions will be read out and a response will be provided by the relevant members of the executive management team. In accordance with sub-rule 56.6.3 of Council's governance rules, an individual written response will only be provided to questions that have not been read out today. All written responses will be available in the minutes on the Colac Otway Shire website once confirmed at the following council meeting. Before I move on, can I have a show of hands from those in the gallery who may wish to ask questions today? Thank you. So moving on to questions submitted in writing. First question from Mr James Judd. Is the Colac Otway Shire Council now so flush with funds to pay for all its known expenses and long-term wants that it has no need of funds from government sources? So you persist in not flying any flag from the flagpoles at the Ray Street office multiple times when people are present. Some still remember when Prince Leonard of the declared Hutt River province tried to take part of Western Australia out of the Australian nation. If you do not acknowledge government by flying their flags, you risk then ignoring the needs of a municipality. Severance movements have been common in the nation going back almost 170 years to the outcry in the goldfields around Ballarat. Response from General Manager, Corporate Services.
Through you, Mayor. Council flies the flags at the Ray Street office on work days and more recently on days of national significance that might fall on weekends or public holidays. We've had some issues recently with the mechanisms on the poles that have created some difficulty in inclement weather, and so there's been a few days where flags weren't able to be flown, but this is being addressed. In addition, the draft budget for 23-24 includes a project to install lighting so that the Australian flag can be flown continuously, day and night, and through the week, and without being reliant on staff being rostered outside normal business hours. This project is subject to adoption of the final budget that will be considered tonight.
Thank you. Question 2. Will the Colac Otway Shire Council please check with Barwon Water about its future priorities to upgrade water and sewage services provided to this shire? This is now urgent due to the change of management and other troubles being reported about the City of Greater Geelong, plus any delays will have a very big impact on the Colac 2050 growth plan. Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. Council has regular communication with Barwon Water and is confident that its future infrastructure planning appropriately takes into account the needs of our shire. In addition, Barwon Water has a representative involved with Council in the development of the Deans Creek Precinct structure plan in Colac.
Thank you. Question 3. Will the Colac Otway Shire Council take action against a commercial map producer that persists in producing maps to promote an area? They are erected at a council-controlled facility, the toilet block at Memorial Square in Colac. They have some facilities at addresses never at or exited this shire over 15 years ago. This is no way for a town to be promoted when people consult a map, then find out facilities do not exist as claimed. Council has had many complaints for years about false maps being put up by these promoters at this site, plus maps get worse every time a new goes up. Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. The signage at the Memorial Square will be removed as part of the impending redevelopment of the toilets. Furthermore, the provision of tourism signage has been considered in the design of the new toilets in Memorial Square.
Thank you. Question 4. As a result of the penalty handed down by the Victorian State Government on property owners in the state budget for 2023-2024 on owners of more than one dwelling, will the Colac Otway Shire Council review its requirement that in certain developments, developers must provide sites for development as dwellings for rent? Since the penalty tax to be introduced on extra dwelling owned will cost developers a lot more, with major risk this will further inflate rental charges, plus play havoc with those who own holiday homes in the country and the tourism industry. Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor, the Council does not have any policy requiring developers to provide rental properties. Council does have a policy that encourages the establishment of social housing in greenfield residential subdivisions, but is not mandated, and so each landowner or developer can consider any taxation implications.
Thank you. Question 5. Has the Colac Otway Shire Council done anything except talk and plan to eliminate the risk of Colac being isolated by flooding since the last major floods about 1 decade ago? We have periods when East Colac had no road access to Colac proper, plus a new highway bridge is still as low, and Barongarel Creek has a very regular habit of flooding and blocking bridges. Colac has been isolated by road multiple times due to floods. While blockages may have been for a short time, each time in an emergency, every second is very important. Do not forget all streams with watersheds in yachtways run down to Colac or the coast in very few hours. Extending closer development around Colac is only adding to the risk of more rapid runoff after rain and increased risks of flood. Do not forget large water flows into the Colac area. Do not run away fast, as this area has a very slow slope. Plus, once in 100-year rain and flood events can happen multiple times in any 1 year, since 1 in 100 years only means 1 chance in 100, and every year has in excess of 360 days. Response, please, from the General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor, Council has undertaken comprehensive flood and stormwater drainage studies in Colac and Birregurra in the last 7 years, and planning controls for new development has been updated accordingly. These studies have provided strategic direction to Council to plan for flood events, manage emergencies in partnership with other agencies, and progressively facilitate changes to Council's drainage networks to improve their capacity and mitigate future flood events. These studies influence budget decisions and strategic planning for new commercial and industrial areas.
Thank you. From Pam Cuthbertson. I've watched our beautiful path that everyone used when COVID hit deteriorate at Ross's Point. I'd like to think that this could be fixed with rocks and Shot Creek before A, the lake comes right back and work cannot be done to it, B, it breaks and falls apart. And the ratepayers of Colac have to pay for it again, plus can't use it. My father was a maintenance person and always said a stitch in time saves 9. Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor, Council has received funding to undertake remediation works at the Ross Point footpath, and construction works are planned to be undertaken in the summer.
Number 2, we have in Colac some amazing iconic buildings, e.g. the old Colac Post Office, and right next door is the old Shire Office. My concern is that someone planted 2 large pine trees right next to this building. They would be best removed before they damage the footings. I love trees, but feel they will do terrible damage if left to grow any bigger. Response, General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor, these trees are on private property and Council does not have any control over the plantings.
Thank you. From Mr Jeff Cook. The question of electrifying the Blue Water Centre has been raised many times at Council, the latest response being that it would cost millions. However, the feasibility study conducted by Bridgeford Group in December 2021 presented 5 options available to Council. Option 2 would result in emissions saving of 45%, net annual savings of $15,502 and cost $534,150. Option 3 would save 49% of emissions, net annual savings of $18,832 and cost $675,780, and the report stated biggest reduction in gas consumption and hence emissions for the site within current electrical requirements. Question 1, why does Council keep misrepresenting potential emission savings and costs for the electrification of Blue Water, and in light of the increasing climate crisis, why doesn't Council revisit all electrification options? And question 2, will Council commit to using funds set aside for carbon offsets to service a loan for the capital works required at Bluewater and thereby spend the offset funds within the Shire? Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. Council made the Bluewater heat pump concept report public in full for our community to view, so there could not be any misrepresentation of the details contained in the report. As detailed in the report, the cost to fully electrify the Bluewater Leisure Centre would be in excess of $3 million, which has been previously communicated publicly. Whilst the report provides multiple options, these options are not recommended as they aren't considered feasible at this point in time due to the considerable and extensive payback period. Therefore, any works are recommended to be undertaken when existing infrastructure is at the end of its asset life and due for replacement. In regards to Council committing funds to undertake the works identified in the report, that is a matter for councillors to determine when the Climate Change Action Plan is considered in the future.
Thank you. Question from Maud Berry. It was encouraging to see the urban greening as part of the Climate Change Action Plan and that there are some worthwhile actions such as developing nature strip planting guidelines and speeding up Council's tree planting on road reserves, nature strips and public open spaces. The targets of increasing the tree canopy cover in urban settlements by 5% by 2030 and 20% by 2040 are welcome. However, there is no indication of what the current baseline levels of canopy exist in each of the towns in the Shire. Will Council undertake to remove the $105 fee required to plant on a nature strip? Will Council commit to the employment of or contracting of a suitably qualified urban forester to establish this baseline canopy cover and to assist Council in development of an urban greening program? Response from Manager, Planning and Strategic Focus.
At this time, Council is still seeking feedback on the draft Climate Change Action Plan. If the target of increasing tree canopy remains in this plan when finally adopted, Council will undertake canopy mapping to determine the baseline for the target and also consider how it can promote urban greening with the community, which may consider whether the removal or reduction of some fees might assist in achieving the target. We're not at this point yet and assure that Council will consider the issue you've raised in the future discussion.
Thank you. Question from Marina Lewis. Since the Climate Change Action Plan has been delayed by over 12 months and will not affect next financial year's budget, will Council, upon finalising the Climate Change Action Plan, undertake special consideration as to what should be prioritised in the 23-24 budget to best deal with the climate crisis which Council has acknowledged? Response from Manager, Planning and Strategic Focus.
That is a matter councillors can consider when the final Climate Change Action Plan is considered.
Thank you. Question from Susan Langridge. Project Drawdown is an internationally recognised plan to reverse global warming. They look for solutions that are readily available for us to use to reduce GHG emissions. Their number one action out of 100 was to recover, reclaim, recycle and destroy refrigerants at the end of their useful life. Fluorocarbon refrigerants in fridges and air conditioning unit damage the ozone layer and contribute to global warming when the unit is dumped, as it is 1,000 times more potent gas than CO2. Does the Colac Otway Shire recover refrigerants from fridges and air conditioning units when they are brought to the transfer station? If so, why isn't this action counted in the Climate Change Action Plan as an action to reduce the Shire's emissions? If not, is this an action Council could consider doing with associated targets to reduce emissions in a real way? Response from Manager, Planning and Strategic Focus.
Thank you for the question. We'll take this on notice and provide you with a detailed reply. At a broader level, Council encourages all members of the community to be raising issues through the community engagement process for the draft Environment Sustainability Strategy and the draft Climate Change Action Plan by making written submissions and completing the online survey. Officers will carefully assess all feedback received before identifying potential improvements to these documents for Council consideration.
Thank you. Question from Mr. Prabha Kuddy. My questions relate to Council's low ratings in the most recent Community Satisfaction Survey, specifically in relation to the ratings from Apollo Bay, where consultation and engagement, lobbying and community decisions were highlighted as being below community expectations. Some council members may recollect that I had made a submission to council on a few occasions with a proposal to use technology to network and engage with the community and to empower them as well. I had also suggested that the Apollo Bay surrounds be used as a pilot, the program, so as to assess the relative merits of my proposal. Could you let me know whether that proposal was considered, and if not, what council plans to improve our customer satisfaction ratings, especially in the Apollo Bay area? Response from General Manager, Corporate Services.
Through you, Mayor. Council understands that technology has a role in providing convenient access for our customers, but has not considered in detail any specific pilot. Our focus in 22-23 was to implement a new customer service request system, which was a major initiative for this current year. We've just completed this technology upgrade and look forward to this improving our responsiveness to many service requests from customers. We understand that the customer survey results demonstrate that we have work to do with customers across the Shire, including Apollo Bay and surrounds. The results were only received recently and we're still considering the feedback.
Thank you. I'll take a supplement. Yeah, could you please? And then as part of the questions from the floor, I'll certainly take your question, Mr Cuddy. Question from Lee Barrett. Under the Gender Equality Action Plan rules, how will the people we remember on Anzac Day and November 11 who left Australia's shores to defend the Australian way of life be described? Up until now, they've been known as men. What are they to be described as now? Will it be discriminatory to say that men left our shores to defend women, children and the vulnerable? Response from General Manager, Corporate Services.
Through you, Mayor. The Gender Equality Action Plan relates to Council's workplace and has no relevance to the matters included in the question.
Question 2. In the Colac Otway Shire draft budget 2023-2024, numbers of males, females and self-appointed gender, SAGs, are noted. In the CEO's department, there are 8 females, 2 SAGs and no males. I would have thought, given that 10% of employees are SAGs and the rest are approximately 50% male and 50% female, that they make up would be 1 SAG, 4/5 males and 4/5 females. Would you clarify how the Gender Equality Action Plan is working in this situation, please? General Manager, Corporate Services.
Through you, Mayor. The draft budget presented vacant positions as self-appointed gender because there is no person who is appointed to those roles, and so we cannot report them as male, female or otherwise. We understand that this has been confusing to the reader, and the final budget document presented for adoption presents the roles as vacant positions. We apologise for any concerns this may have caused.
Thank you. That concludes written questions. I had an indication that there's a number of questions from the floor. Mr Cuddy, we'll take your question first, please, as a follow-up to the written one.
If I may just ask the General Manager, has he had a look at the proposal that I put forward?
Through you, Mayor. No, we haven't had any look at any specific proposals as yet, and as we improve, we'll take in all ideas and proposals on how we improve our customer service.
I must confess, sir, that I find it...
Can I just interrupt? Sure. Mr Surin, who's been here longer than Mr Tenney, Mr Cuddy, may wish to add to that.
Sure.
Through you, Mayor. Just to add to that, yeah, Mr Tenney hasn't yet been with us for 12 months, I don't think. So your proposal was submitted, I think, in relation to the governance rules at the time?
3 different times.
Yeah. So a number of members of the EMT have had a look at the proposal. So, yeah, just to clarify that we have seen it, we have reviewed it, but we haven't been in a position to roll something like that out at this point in time.
If I won't waste any more time, but if I may talk to you later so that I can, it says why, so that I can then come up with something else. Thanks.
Thank you. That'll be helpful. Thank you, Mr. Cuddy. Mr. Billing, I think you had a hand up for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alan Billing, Colac. I'm making an assumption. I haven't had the opportunity to see the budget or the draft. Sorry, the budget that's presented today. So my comments are reflective of the draft budget. In the preamble to the draft budget, there was much made of the impact of inflation on council's operations. A 3.5% increase will add to inflation. When developing the budget, did council have regard for this impact?
Thanks, Mr. Billing. Mr. Tenney or Mr. Chasemore or the CEO?
Yeah, I'm happy to provide a response. So thank you, Mr. Billing. Through the Mayor, no. I can say that Council didn't have any detailed or even very much consideration about the impact of Colac Otway Shire Council's budget on national inflation. No.
Thank you. A bit surprising. Council will, I trust, be aware of the increased demand on welfare services excuse me, across Colac Otway. In preparing the 23-24 budget, was an assessment done to determine the community's capacity to pay?
I'm happy to again respond. So thank you, Mr. Billing. The affordability of all of our communities, the bills that our community face, is a consideration that Council, I think has put their mind to, councillors and officers put their mind to frequently as the budget has been developed. We haven't done a formal assessment about individual capacity, but as a community we know that affordability of our rates, our bills and all of those that they receive from other agencies, service providers, etc., are a challenge for our community. In terms of impact on health services, etc., the state and federal governments, but the state government in particular, have also seen some reduction of budget in those areas, and that's something that we've been looking at from a regional perspective rather than necessarily a local perspective, because our community reach out to many providers. So we've looked at that in partnership with others rather than specifically about council's budget and our own services alone. So that's the response I can provide.
So the focus in determining the budget has been the issues that council faces, not necessarily the issues that the community face. So,
no, I think actually that there's a consideration given to both what council needs to provide, the cost of the services that council provide, the revenue streams available, and where we can find alternative revenue to relieve the need to ask our community to pay for that. But there also is a need to make sure those services are sustainable, and the budget as framed is based on a 3.5% average rate increase.
Has council had a close look at its efficiencies and made assessments there?
Yes, in a number of areas, a closer look than others, because that's progressive work that we will continue to do, and the budget has included a number of savings that are achieved through efficiencies without any impact on customer, and we did that last year in our budget. We've done it this year in our budget. We've quantified that to demonstrate, the effort that we have made, and we have more work to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Webber.
Tony Webber, Otway Forum. With the Bruce Street development, is there any social housing provided in the 54-lot subdivision, and if not, why not?
Mr. McNeil.
Through you, Mayor, the land sale agreement with the developer is such that there's a requirement for them to provide 3 lots of a minimum of 500 square metres to council for social housing. That agreement sits outside the planning permit process, so that's why you wouldn't see any reference to it in the permit conditions recommended today.
Thank you for that. I've asked a question before about Nelson Street in Apollo Bay. It's a major walking area. It has no footpath, with the next budget, could that be considered to be part of the budget and funding, and maybe not using concrete, try something else?
Mr Chasemore?
Yeah, through you, Mayor, we can consider that as any, for future works, is in future budget or in next year's budget if appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you. There were some other hands. Could I have Mr Barrett and Catherine? We'll take you, Mr Barrett.
Lee Barrett, Colac. My questions that were read out a few minutes ago, I submitted in writing for this council meeting, asking that they not be read out, that I may receive a prompt response and they be included in the minutes. The reason that I made the request was that if they were read out, I would not receive a written response, even though it is stored and easily available on council's computer system. This is council's new ruling. I had an email from a council officer with the answers saying that unless it was read out, it would not be included in the minutes. If I want to include it in the minutes, it had to be read out, so get in touch, which I did. So I have my answer in writing, and the questions and answers are read out for the benefit of the public at the council meeting. So why do we have this absurd situation, Mr Mayor? Why don't you and councillors rescind the motion today as under a motion of urgent business? Doesn't need any lengthy discussion, just yes or no. I mean, some of these answers today are quite complex and they belong to groups. You know, they want to take them back to their meeting. I reckon it'd take 10 minutes every month for a council officer to just take the PDF, put in the reply of the email. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Barrett. And councillors will discuss that, but it is correct for you to have them in the minutes as you requested. I did have to read them out. I thought I was doing the right thing. Catherine Ford.
Thank you, Catherine Ford. Quick question. The council is making decisions on the basis that there is a climate crisis. What is this particular climate crisis and where it is appearing in our shire?
I think we made that call on the basis of available science that many of us are aware of. But Mr McNeil, might you be able to expand a little bit?
Through you, Mayor. Climate change and the challenge of climate change is documented well in a range of national and state strategies and in legislation that requires state and federal governments to act to reduce carbon emissions. Local government also has its obligations in this regard, and Council has prepared a climate change action plan and a draft environment sustainability strategy that document how this Council aims to try and respond to those challenges. This Shire it has seen over the last 10 years changes in its climate in respect of drier weather, less rainfall, higher bushfire risk conditions. Those are the sorts of impacts that would continue to be evident over subsequent years, in addition to some of the larger scale impacts such as higher coastal erosion and sea levels. But this Shire, as other places in Australia, will continue to see those impacts occurring.
Well, I'd like to ask, has the council done its own research on the climate change before committing to this climate action and environmental plan? And I've actually got some data here that shows since 1885, that the sea levels haven't really moved a hell of a lot. And this is from the main weather channel. And the hot days, well, it shows that the graph hasn't really changed much, so it's pretty. I can leave these with you. You can have a look at them if you like. And I live on a farm, and I can tell you, I've been on my farm for 35 years, and the weather really hasn't. You might have one hot year here or there, but it's bloody wet. So I don't know where the global warming's coming from and the climate change, because it's wet.
Thanks, Catherine. I think you opened with a question at the start. Have we done our own independent research? Is that what you asked?
Yes.
Mr McNeil?
Through you, Mayor. Certainly Council, in producing its current strategies that are available on exhibition, has done research into the latest science in terms of climate change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Barb?
Barb Elford from Barongarook. Thanks for taking my question. At last council meeting, you revoked permission for a committee of management at the Barongarook Hall. And Tennis Reserve Committee of Management. I'd just like to know what public consultation took place on that and who made the decision to revoke that committee. And now that there is no committee of management, how do we go about hiring the hall as a council asset? I assume it still is.
Thank you. Marlo, can you help with that? Sorry, or...
So through the Mayor, Barbara, thanks. We might take that on notice because I'm just not sure that I can recall it being Barongarook. I accept that you've read it and come with a question specifically.
Yes.
But there was definitely a Community Asset Committee revoked recently, okay? And if that was Barongarook, this answer will apply. Who revoked it? Council through resolution. Council establishes Community Asset Committees through resolution and makes appointment of members through resolution. We've recently been through a process in the last 12 months of reaffirming with members. Were they willing to continue in the role of members because they had a sunset in place, a date? And those who came back, those committees with enough members who came back and said, yes, we want to stay members, we want to continue to do this work, then those committees have continued. But we did have a committee where we didn't have enough members to make it a viable committee. And the remaining members said, we just don't have enough for us to make this work. So at this time, Council has therefore revoked that committee and said, well, we'll take carriage of the day-to-day responsibility, etc. But we're working closely with the former members to see what the way forward is. I think that that's what I recall of the situation from the Manager of Governance. Is that the understanding? So none of this has been done in terms of consultation. None of this has been done without discussion with those people who we had on our books as registered volunteer committee members. Okay, and if more members come forward or potential members come forward, then we would be absolutely delighted to work with them and see if that re-establishes a committee. And I think it was Barwon Downs that I'm recalling, yeah. I don't recall Barongarook, but I do recall that being the situation with Barwon Downs. And we've had recent meetings with the Barwon Downs people about that. So, but we'll take it on notice in case it was Barongarook and get back to you, okay?
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Just I know that in past there was community liaison officers or some such, and public meetings were called to ascertain community interest in continuing those committees of management. And I just wondered when that had happened and how we arrived at this. And if there is no committee of management in place, my next question is, why is the hall now listed as not available for hire when it is still, I assume, a council asset?
Yeah, okay, we'll take on notice the specifics around Barongarook.
Thank you.
We haven't done a broad expression of interest, advertised process, etc. We've been more just re-establishing with those members that we had already registered, and that's where we've started with just as we regroup.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barb. Any other questions? We are over time, but no worries. Thanks, everyone. We'll move on. No petitions or joint letters. Declarations of conflict of interest, please. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest in relation to today's agenda? Mr. Tenney.
Through you, Mayor, I've got a conflict of interest in relation to item 9.3, the fees and charges for the Blue Water Leisure Centre.
Could you outline what your conflict is?
As being a member of the centre.
Thank you. I'll declare a conflict of interest in relation to the same item, as I am a member of Blue Water. Anybody else? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll declare a conflict of interest in relation to item 9.10, specifically the items in that section, items 21 and 22, conflict of interest arises as these items have been auspiced by the Apollo Bay Chamber of Commerce, who made a disclosable gift towards my election campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a conflict of interest in two of the items, 9.4 for the OPIS fees over family member in receipt of those services, and 9.10, the events grants, which is respect to the Colac Area Health Foundation, of which I am a board director.
Thank you. Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a conflict in relation to item 9.5, the endorsement of fees and charges for the Health Protection Administration. This is due to my previous involvement in a hub, which has now come to an end, but during the time this was being considered, I was a member of that ownership group. Likewise, I also have a conflict of interest in relation to item 9.10 in relation to my involvement in the same business due to the events grants.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. I think, Councillor Hanson, you might be trying to put up your hand. Yep.
Yes, I have a conflict of interest in relation to item 9.4, the Blue Water fees and charges, due to the fact that I am a member of Blue Water, and also item 9.9, community grants, due to my involvement with the Colac Basketball Association and my family's involvement.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Mr. Surun.
Through you, Mayor, you'd like to declare a general conflict of interest for item 9.9, the allocation of funds for community grants. I'm a member of the Colac Football Netball Club and the Colac Basketball Association. Both groups have applied for a community grant.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thanks, councillors. I propose that we move to confirm the minutes of the council meeting held on Wednesday the 24th of May 2023. Do I have a mover? Thanks, Councillor Hart. Seconder? Councillor Arnott. This is to be opposed? Thank you. All those in favour? Thanks, councillors. Thanks, Councillor Hanson. That's carried 7-0. We'll move on to officers' reports now, councillors. Item 9.1, subdivision of land into 54 lots, 36 to 52 Bruce Street, Colac. The purpose of this report is to consider to the application for the subdivision of land into 54 lots at 36 to 52 Bruce Street, Colac. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Mayor, I understand that there's been a rewriting of this one on a few points. Can we see that, please, so that we understand what those changes are?
Councillor Hart.
Have these, well, two questions. The first one, has the applicant had the opportunity to see the suggested conditions? And the second question is, had the applicant had the opportunity to see the suggested change conditions?
Mr. McNeil.
Through you, Mayor, certainly the applicant had a chance to look at the draft conditions that were put before council in the agenda, and I believe that they were generally comfortable with those. We incorporated some suggested changes into the drafting of them. They haven't seen the amended set of conditions that have come about through discussions with councillors this afternoon, although I had discussions with them about particularly the impact of the trees in Bruce Street, if they were to be retained, what impact that might have on road and other infrastructure in Bruce Street. So they understand the nature of those discussions. They'll, if council moves a resolution to change the the recommended conditions in the way that are proposed on the screen. Probably the biggest challenge will be doing some further assessment of the trees in Bruce Street and being able to then design works that maximise retention of trees but still appropriately provide for the required infrastructure there. I might just make a suggestion while I'm talking, if I can, Mr Mayor. There's a further suggested change that I would make to condition 25F, which is the condition that relates to landscaping particularly. And condition F at the moment talks about retention of trees on McGonigal Street, and I'd be suggesting that you add the words "and Bruce Street" after the words McGonigal Street to match up with the changes that are made in an earlier condition.
Thanks, Mr McNeil. That seems a sensible suggestion. Thanks, Graham. I'll just wait for staff to do that, which is done. You got a question, Councillor Costin?
Thank you, Mayor. So we're talking about the trees on McGonigal Street and Bruce Street. What about the trees along the northern boundary of the site?
Through you, Mayor, many of the trees along the northern boundary of the site would by necessity need to be removed through the subdivision. There's a road to be constructed along that northern boundary as well as paths and other infrastructure, and particularly the venting system which would be required to be implemented along the northern boundary for landfill gas mitigation from the site to the north. It wasn't considered that those trees could be reasonably retained whilst undertaking to provide that infrastructure.
Any other questions? Councillors, there's a revised recommendation on the screen. Would any councillor like to move a motion?
Can I just ask, Mr Mayor, I don't think that's a revised recommendation, is it?
Well, no,
a revised
correct.
officer recommendation, it's just a, I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hanson, you're absolutely correct. Any councillor like to move a motion? Councillor White. Thank you. Is that to be seconded? Councillor Hart. And Councillor White, you're moving, the words are up on the screen. Yep, thank you. Is this to be opposed? Councillor Costin, thank you. Councillor White.
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly to say that the Bruce Street development has been a long time coming, and it's been part of many discussions, and it's really pleasing to see that it is now coming to fruition, and we've got a development plan before us. It's a really exciting opportunity for Colac, and it's pleasing to see that we could present a subdivision, I think, that gives a variety of lots and sizes to the community, that can bring different people into the development and meet a whole range of different needs, from smaller lots to bigger lots to more isolated lots and lots with different outlooks. And it's really pleasing that we've been able to do that. I'm also pleased to see that we are going to consider more carefully the retention of the trees in Bruce Street, because I think they really add to the amenity of the area, and that we get some more considered advice around how mature trees can be included in the development and construction, even if it means that we retain some of the trees, not all of the trees, because I can see that might be a stretch too far. But otherwise, I think the plan as it's presented is very comprehensive, and I would like to move the recommendation.
Thanks, Councillor White. Councillor Hart?
I'll reserve. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor Costin?
Thank you, Mayor. I think in this subdivision, it's a greenfields subdivision, that we should be trying to achieve the very best layout we can, which achieves affordable housing, environmental sustainability, and presents a pleasing amenity to the people who live there. We're trying to attract people into Colac Otway Shire. We're trying to grow our population. And I think this is a compromised layout, a compromised design. I'm concerned about lot 24. Perhaps if we could show the map up on the screen. Lot 24 is a battle axe or hammerhead subdivision. These subdivisions are expensive to build on because they require long driveways, paved parking areas because there's no street parking and long lengths of services. It will be quite expensive to build on this lot. And we're trying to provide more affordable housing. The other aspect that concerns me is the solar orientation. And I know we've achieved the minimum standard here, and that's great. And thank you to officers for actually calculating that percentage of solar orientation. But that's a minimum standard. And in fact, in our council plan, we have included an advocacy priority to lift that standard. So on one hand, in our council plan, we want to see a higher standard, but in this greenfields development, we're proposing only the minimum standard. It doesn't sit well with me, and in particular, I'm concerned about lots 48, 49, 50, which are the ones designated for affordable housing or social housing. These are narrow lots. They've got the right long axis, which is facing east-west, but they're narrow, quite narrow. So if someone builds a two-storey house to the north of one of these lots, it could shade north-facing windows and compromise the passive solar potential of those lots. The other thing that concerns me is the removal of trees. So we're proposing to retain trees along McGonigal Street and Bruce Street, which is great. But the layout as presented also requires the removal of trees along the north boundary. And there are more trees along that north boundary than there are in Bruce Street and McGonigal Street. And of course that abuts onto our Bruce Street Reserve. So I think, you know, we're trying to achieve affordable housing. We're trying to achieve a pleasing amenity by keeping as many trees as possible. And we're trying to maximise environmental sustainability of our site, and we haven't actually achieved this in this layout. It's a compromised layout. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Costa. Any other councillor? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, holistically, I'd like to speak in favour of the motion. I think it's a reasonable outcome. I would have to agree with one component of Councillor Costin's comment. Yes, it's a compromised layout, but so is everything. There's a limited area of land. I think, achieves a balance of the outcomes. There's a different size of lots in there, some small and some large. I actually approve of that approach. It gives opportunities for people to put different size of housing on there. They don't have to all be McMansions on large allotments. They can be smaller houses that might only be two-bedroom houses for people who fit that socio-economic piece, or maybe just for people who've decided to downsize. As far as that lot 24, it's a large allotment, and that's designed hopefully to allow someone to build a larger premises there, maybe 3 houses or 3 or 4 units in there. It's got a single driveway entry to achieve that, that's fine. And in any other development we've seen in the past, you would see the housing almost degenerate to a position where they become very, very low value, and then a developer will finally move in, buy three lots close together, amalgamate them to put units on them. So we're actually short-circuiting that process and recognise that's part of the way a community may evolve over time, and now putting it there as an option right up front by this large allotment. So I think it ticks all those boxes. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Any other councillor? Councillor Finnegan.
I'd like to speak in favour of this. I think it's going to be a really good outcome for the community, having 54 new lots, 3 lots of social housing. I think that I understand Councillor Costin's concerns, but I do respectfully disagree. I think having more stock out there in the market is only going to lead to increased outcome, better outcomes, and hopefully by enabling more people to access the market. We do have a housing shortage here, not just within the Colac Otway Shire in general, but within Colac, and hopefully by approving this development, we'll be able to see more people get into the housing market and be able to move out of home and get more people houses, and here's to doing more of it.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Hart, you reserved.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think I'll start by bringing us...
Hang on,
sorry.
Mayor, I was just
Sorry.
waving my
Thank,
hand.
thank
Sorry,
you,
Councillor
Councillor
Hart.
Hanson.
Sorry,
Yeah, go
Councillor
ahead.
Hart, for interrupting. I also wanted to speak in favour of the motion. The site in Bruce Street is in the general residential zone. It has been zoned like that for a very long time, and so it's a site that fits a subdivision of this nature. It's not really a greenfield site. It's an infill site. It's not in an open paddock on a brand new sort of greenfield subdivision where you can, I guess, orientate blocks, exactly the way you want them, or set things up perfectly. This is an infill site, and I think the development plan works the best it can, with the fact that it has got development already around it. So, and I think within that we get a really good mix of block sizes. So I think the minimum block size is 412 square metres up to a block size of just over 1,000 square metres, which is quite large. And I think it really strikes a good balance between the types of block sizes that are affordable and that people want. There's no doubt in our community in Colac that sometimes there is a lack of not only a supply of vacant blocks, but the types of blocks that people might want. Not everybody wants a 1,000 square metre block. There's a lot of people at different stages of their life that want different size block to build a different type of house, and I think this subdivision certainly provides for that. Like I said, it satisfies the need for infill growth. One of the best things you get with infill growth is you get the development close to amenities. So close within walking distance of Bruce Street, you have access to the lake, which is absolutely absolutely fantastic. You are within walking distance of a primary school, of a local hotel, the much loved East Hotel, a supermarket, the showgrounds. There's a lot in close proximity to this infill site. So I'm very supportive of it. I think it strikes a good balance. Definitely there'll be opportunities for different types of housing, different types of block sizes, and that should be affordable for our community. And for those people who want larger blocks, there's that opportunity there as well. And sometimes on these infill sites, you do get the odd sort of quirky block size or block, which might be sort of like that battle axe block, but there are a lot of people who love those types of blocks and the privacy and the sort of the large size of a block like that. So I think this very much strikes the balance. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor Hanson, sorry about that. Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I think in discussing this, we need to come back to what we're deciding here today. We're deciding whether or not to grant a planning permit. And as with any application we have before us, there can be a whole spectrum of range of options that meet the planning requirements. And I think quite clearly this does meet the planning requirements, although I do share some of the reservations that Councillor Costin has talked about, such as that Northern Road, which is its placement, which is causing the need to remove how that's set out, removing some of those trees. But if you have the road there, you need to have the trees removed, obviously. And I come back to, we're deciding on a planning permit, and it's often that we have to decide on something that might not be perfect. Some other councillors have touched on that issue. We don't have it's a constrained site in the sense that it is coming up to an existing developed area. Some of the improvements that I feel were touched on in Councillor White's alternative resolution are trying to retain those trees along Bruce Street as much as possible, ensuring that the northern path, the shared pathway, is constructed in a timely manner in the subdivision that will run along that northern boundary and give access from McGonigal Street through to Bruce Street for improve the walkability of this area. And the other modified the requirement in terms of gas. I think really people are starting to vote with their feet and moving towards, there's a transition towards electricity, a transition to solar and energy use that reduces emissions to help mitigate climate change collectively. And so I question the need for gas to be connected to this particular subdivision and feel the change to that clause gives the option to the developer that if they choose to, they don't need to submit it for approval to construct gas connection. And I think as a council, we have to consider whether our planning scheme should recognise the move away from gas and not require connection to gas as part of new subdivisions.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor White, right a reply.
Thank you. Just to say that in complex projects like this, there's always going to be compromises, and we don't want to throw out the good to try and achieve the unachievable perfect. I wouldn't want to see the project delayed to try and get to that perfect, because I don't think we'll ever get there. I think lots been said about Lot 24, and I actually think it presents opportunities to someone who might actually see that as a bonus and get creative about how they want to use it. So I think it's exciting to see the project proceed, and I'm pleased to recommend this and to provide a planning permit.
Thanks, Councillor White. Councillors, I'll call for a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried 7-0. Councillor Hart. Councillor Costin was swayed by the power of your argument. Item 9.2, Buller Development Plan at 91 to 149 Forest Street, Colac. The purpose of this report is to consider approval of a development plan for land in the Industrial 1 zone at 91 to 149 Forest Street, Colac, in accordance with requirements of the Development Plan Overlay Schedule 6. Do councillors have questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to ask about the area to the north of this development plan, the treed area along, what's the name of the creek? Barongarug Creek, yes. What are the future proposals for that creek area? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, the northern part of the site adjoining Barongarug Creek is shown in council strategies as potential future open space and providing a pathway linkage along the creek through to Forest Street. At this stage, that connection hasn't occurred, and it's not something that Buller are obligated to do, but it's something that council will continue to work with them over a period of time to see whether or not that might be realised. But Mr. Surin might be able to add to that.
Through you, Mayor, yeah, I might actually add to that. Thanks, Mr. McNeil. So that area is known as Joseph Patch Reserve and has been developed by the Rotary Club of West over a number of years. And so that is currently a linear parcel of open space, still owned by Buller, but we've got a some kind of agreement with Buller for use of that as public open space.
Councillor White.
And just further to that is the plan into the future to connect it up, so we've got a linear connection right through to the lake. Is that one of the plans for the future?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Yeah, we do have a concept plan to link the lake right through to Forest Street. There are some challenges between Wilson Street and essentially the Coles supermarket. There's a couple of barriers there that do pose a bit of a challenge, but yeah, that would be a great ambition to get that in place at some stage in the future.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this?
I'd like to move that.
Councillor Arnott, thank you. Is it to be seconded? Councillor White, is it to be opposed? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think the plan does respond appropriately to and positively to development overlays for the site and also for its strategic planning requirements. And it would achieve a positive economic outcome for both business and the Shire residents as continued employment. And I think it's important to note that outside of that, Bulla continues to be supportive of our community with their industrial growth and employment, and we should also recognise their prior contribution, we just spoke of that, of land towards the Barongarook Creek Reserve. They did open that up for the Rotary Club of Colac West to develop the Joseph Patch Reserve. It'd be nice to see that, I guess, further formalised and continued on as you've spoken of, and certainly that was something that the Rotary Club back then had considered. But whether or not they could actually have the manpower to continue, that's another thing, but it'd be nice to have the opportunity to do so. So I would say thank you to Bulla for that support to the community today, and for the other support that they bring to us. And all of that aside, for the development itself, I would commend the motion to council.
Thank you, Councillor Arnott. Councillor White, did you wish to speak?
Just briefly to add to Councillor Arnott, to say that it really does indicate Bulla's commitment to our community ongoing, and that they are a very, very significant employer in the town and very supportive of our community. I think what they've put before us is incredibly comprehensive and very clear about their intentions. The application has got so many different plans to support it, including open space plans, master plans, biodiversity plans, transport management plans. So I think that they've been very thorough, and I'm pleased to second the motion.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillors, I will put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried 7-0. Councillors, the next item on the agenda is item 9.3, adoption of 2023-2024 budget, endorsement of fees and charges for Blue Water Leisure Centre. The purpose of this report is to present for consideration adoption of the fees and charges of the Blue Water Leisure Centre, which form part of the fees and charges in order to manage conflicts of interests. Councillors, I've declared a conflict of interest in relation to this matter, as has Councillor Hanson, and Mr Tenney also has declared a conflict. That being the case, I will have to vacate the chair, and we'll need to appoint a chairperson to handle the discussion of this item. Are there any volunteers for that role? Thank you, Councillor Costin. Councillor Costin has offered to chair this part of the meeting tonight. All those in favour of that? Sorry? There's no motion? Yeah. Councillor White moves it. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Finnegan. Any opposition to that? Councillors, can we have a vote that we appoint Councillor Costin the chair for this item? Thank you. That's carried 7-0. Thank you, councillors. I'll see you shortly. Thanks, Councillor Hanson.
So thank you, remaining councillors. We move on to item 9.3, adoption of the 2023-24 budget, endorsement of fees and charges for Blue Water Leisure Centre. So the purpose of this report is to present for consideration and adoption the fees and charges for the Blue Water Leisure Centre, which form part of the fees and charges for 2023-24. I'm here in order to manage the conflict of interests in relation to Councillor Potter and Councillor Hanson. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Thank you. No questions. We'll move on. Councillors, officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter?
Through you, Chair.
Councillor Arnott moves. Seconder. Councillor White. Thank you, Councillor Arnott. You're the mover of this motion. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair Potter. Councillor Potter, look, in determining the fees...
Sorry, Councillor Arnott, I missed a point here, which is not listed on my running sheet. Is this motion to be opposed?
Sorry.
No opposition. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Acting Chair. Councillor Costin. I think I called you Councillor Potter before, apologies. In determining the fees, we've tried to keep them as low as possible, any increases, and we've also tried to ensure that we support users such as families and those with pension cards, etc., to keep in mind of the cost of living increases and such within our community. And the centre also receives a budget support from the general community through our rating system to make sure it continues to be accessible for the general public so that children can learn to swim, people can exercise and enjoy sports within the facility. So it is a balance between charging a fee which appropriately maintains the financial sustainability of the facility, but also keeps a reasonable access for the community and the cost to an affordable level. So it's on that basis that I commend the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arnott. Councillor White.
Just to reiterate what Councillor Arnott said, but to also emphasise that there's a lot and feedback from the community is always considered, and it is a difficult and considered decision to increase our fees and charges because we do have to balance off accessibility with sustainability, and in the end we have to make those difficult decisions, but I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor White. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No one else? Thank you. I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion's passed 5-0. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Costin. Just waiting for Kate to come back online. Welcome back, Councillor Hanson. We'll move on to item 9.4, adoption of 2023-2024 budget, endorsement of fees and charges for community services OPAS. Purpose of this report is to present for consideration adoption of the fees and charges of the Community Services Older Persons Ability Support Service, which form part of the fees and charges 2023-2024 in order to manage. We have some conflicts or conflict of interest. Councillor Arnott, I think you declared a conflict of interest on this item.
I did, Mayor, yes.
Could you just repeat for us what that conflict of interest is?
The nature of that conflict of interest is I have a family member who is in receipt of the OPAS services.
Thank you. You may leave the room. Anybody else? Do councillors have questions of officers? No questions. Councillors' officers have provided a recommendation with a report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Somebody? Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Is there a seconder for that? Sorry, is there a seconder for that? Thanks, Councillor White. Is this be opposed? No, thank you. Councillor Finnegan?
Yes, I sort of move this motion because we need to set these fees and charges, notwithstanding what's happening with the review, because otherwise these services won't go forward. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor White, did you wish to say anything?
Just to reiterate what I said previously, that it's always a difficult and considered decision, and feedback has been taken into account, and we need to increase them to this level. I'd second the motion.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillors, I'll put the motion to vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That motion is carried 6-0. Councillors, item 9.5, adoption of the 2023-24 budget endorsement and fees and charges for Health Protection Administration. Purpose of this report is to present for consideration and adoption the fees and charges for the Public Health Protection Administration registration fees, which form part of the fees and charges 2023-24 in order to manage. Councillors, does anyone have a conflict of interest? Councillor Finnegan, could you give us the nature of that conflict, please?
Yes, Mayor. So my conflict of interest is in relation to my former, or now former, ownership at the Tea Tree Hotel at Warrion. Obviously is a venue that serves food, so would be affected by any changes in the fees or anything like that. No longer in an ownership position within this business. However, as I was at the time this was considered the start, I feel it's right to sit this one out. So.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Any other declarations? Thank you. Councillor Finnegan, leave the room. Councillors, do we have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if we had any submissions in relation to these fees and charges, health fees and charges.
Through you, Mayor, I don't believe we did.
Thanks, Mr Cutter. Any other questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with a report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Thanks, Councillor Costin. Is to be seconded? Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Is to be opposed? Councillor Costin, did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Very, very briefly, I'm pleased to move these fees and charges. We didn't receive any submissions on these, so I'm happy just to move that they be adopted as is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Arnott, did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, I'd like to endorse Councillor Costin's comments and that encourage people, if they ever want to put submissions in, they should feel free to do so. We always do take note of them in any of our actions and decisions. But aside from that, I would just like to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Councillors, that's carried 6-0. Thanks, Jill. Welcome back, Councillor Finnegan. Councillors, item 9.6, adoption of operational 2023-24 budget. The purpose of this report is to present the budget 2023 to 2024, including 2023-24 fees and charges for Council's consideration and adoption. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. This question sort of crosses over two items, but when I ask it, I think you understand the context. In adopting the budget, which is what this item is, 9.6, if we look to item 9.8, there's some funds that may be carried over to next financial year. So how is that issue going to be resolved? If we carry over funds to the next financial year, and we haven't decided that yet, how will that be resolved if we now adopt a budget which sets certain expenditures and income, but then in just a short time later today, we carry over funds, and how will those funds be used? I'm just trying to understand how that process will sit.
Thanks, CEO.
So I'm happy to respond to this one rather than direct it down to my Manager of Finance in this instance. So thank you, Councillor Hart, for your question through the Mayor. The development of the 2023-24 budget as presented, and it states this in the budget, actually doesn't include any consideration of project funding to be carried forward from this current financial year. Okay? And we will do that as part of our interview process, and then we will update the Q1 financial statements to Council inclusive of the end of year outcomes, including project funding carried forward. Amongst the financial balance of that, we will include all of the unallocated renewal funds or unallocated project funds that are captured through the project transfer table tonight and all through this year, okay? So those funds will be ring-fenced, they'll be carried forward to the new financial year, they'll be incorporated into next year's financial budget, budgets for projects, etc., through that end-of-year process. We'll be able to confirm exactly which projects they've come from and what the balance is. Council can then consider what to do with those unallocated funds through future project transfer tables, which we've now got as a monthly standing item for councillors, or through a standalone consideration if a specific issue arises, and that will all be available to be transparent to the community and subject to the good processes that the meeting provides. None of it will fall to the bottom line unless council resolves to actually free those funds up specifically to that purpose. I hope that's answered. the question. And that will happen probably as we wrap up the end of financial year, probably, in the next 2 to 3 months. Has that answered the question?
So, Mayor, would it be fair to say that nothing in adopting the budget prevents council from considering how those funds that the CEO is referring to might be allocated? Notwithstanding that we set a budget today, we're not stopping consideration of those other funds.
Yeah, that's correct. The adoption of the budget as presented tonight will only create commitments for additional projects, okay, to be funded within the 2023-24 year, and doesn't make any constraint on council's consideration of what to do with the funds that are that we've referred to as unallocated.
Councillor Costin, you had a question?
Thank you, Mayor. We received 30 submissions on this budget and fees and charges. It's quite a few, not as many as the City of Geelong, of course, but still 30 is quite a few, and we've tabulated what those submissions are about, but we don't seem to have, in the report, said what we've done in response to those submissions. So in relation to Bruce Street, we said what we've changed, but if an officer can just explain very briefly what we've changed as a result of those 30 submissions from the draft budget that went out for public exhibition.
Through you, Mayor, obviously all those submissions were considered at the time, and there's been no adjustments made to the budget as it currently stands. All submitters will receive a letter in response to their submission. There are a number of things in those responses, including how we might handle some of those items going forward and how we review those, and how we consider a way forward in regards to how we might accommodate or address those in the future. I believe through you, CEO, there was one minor adjustment, that was about the, sorry?
That was in relation to a $5,000 allocation.
That's correct, yep.
To the Garden Awards, which has been an historic award that people have seen celebrated in Colac. It actually hasn't occurred in the last couple of years. And we had a submission to recognise the $5,000 as being allocated to something that then doesn't take place. But rather than actually take that funding away, Council, we have suggested in the final budget as presented that it, for now, be included in the budget alongside the community grant allocation. We can seek expressions of interest or invite opportunities from maybe community groups to see if anyone wants to take up become the Garden Awards champion and run a process whereby that funding could be put to that use. And if not, there's an opportunity for council to perhaps support another fantastic community grant. So that's how we've probably responded to that matter.
Councillor Costin.
Thank you for that response. One of the questioners today posed the question, will council undertake to remove the $105 fee required to plant on the nature strip? So we have an objective to increase our tree cover, our tree canopy, but on the other hand, we're charging a fee which might be working counterproductive to that. So if we remove that $105 fee, what would it cost council in lost revenue per year, roughly?
I'm sorry, I would have to take that on notice, Councillor. It's very specific, but it's a fair question. I couldn't get that right now.
I imagine it'd be very small amount.
I would assume that's the case.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Costin. Any other questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Costin, seconded Councillor Arnott. Sorry? Well, yeah, it's a good question.
Before we do, Mr Mayor, can I just point out that the officers have actually tonight recognise that we can make an improvement to our own recommendation. We've got a revised recommendation on the screen. We'll ask that to be captured in the minutes, regardless of what motion is ultimately moved, just to be transparent about what's on the screen.
Thanks, CEO. So Councillor Costin had his hand up first, Councillor Runner. So Councillor Costin...
I wanted to move an alternate, Mayor, if I could, which just includes an additional clause there that we scrap the $105 fee for owner planting on nature strips. Otherwise, all exactly the same.
We'll have to work out where to include that. Councillor Hart, you wanted to say something?
Well, I think I'm going to be seconding what Councillor Costin's moving. A way how as this has been dealt with before, because there may be, we're reviewing local laws and what have you, is to set this fee to zero for the time being, and there is precedent for that, and that means that the issue can be teased out when we do the local law review. So I'm happy for advice from the CEO, but setting the fee to zero could make sure that it's teased out in a more orderly fashion when we do the local laws.
That does sound sensible. Do you have a view on that, CEO?
No, I don't have any concern if Council resolves to set that fee specifically to zero. I don't think it'll be material enough to change any of the income in the budget that is to be adopted.
I'm happy to set it to zero.
So, Councillor Costin, are you moving now as part of the fees and charges component of the budget that the fee for that action will be set to zero?
Exactly. Correct.
Can I perhaps suggest what Councillor Costin is moving is some additional words to point 1 of the revised recommendation? That at the end might say, subject to the fee for planting in nature strips being set to $0. In attachment 3. Is that reflecting your intention? Thank you.
So thank you. Councillors, Councillor Costin.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Hanson. Yep.
Just in setting that fee to zero, I just want to just make sure then that council still requires somebody who wants to plant a tree on their nature strip, just so that, you know, they're planting the right type of tree in the right spot, you know, not under power lines or, you know, or I don't know, on top of services, that they would still be required to get, do they still have to get permission from the council?
So the local law will still apply, and if there's a requirement for that to have a permit from council, the permit will still need to be granted. There will just be no fee for that permit, and I think that our finance team are just confirming I may have not got the wording correct, so please help.
Sorry, yeah, no, I think that's fine, isn't it? Yeah, the local law is for vegetation.
Yeah, it's referred to as vegetation.
Yeah.
It's not a particularly helpful description, but we'll make sure that it's the one that currently is proposed to be $105.
Yeah, sorry, it's 110, just so we know.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
In
Very
2023,
important.
it's currently 105. Next year we'll go to zero. Yeah, thank you. It is, I think it's listed under roads or something. Local laws, it's local law fee. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go from 105 this year to zero next year until council resolves otherwise.
Thank you. Good suggestion, Councillor Hart. So, Councillor Costin, with the wording included up there, is this your motion?
Yes, it is, Mayor.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Hart. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for refining that wording. I'd like to thank the CEO and the finance team and all the other staff who've contributed to this building this draft budget and fees and charges. It's, I think it's one of the most readable budgets that we've had since I've been on council. It does provide a new level of transparency in what projects we're undertaking, and I support this for the coming financial year. Rates will increase by 3.5% in line with the government's rate cap. By comparison, the CPI Consumer Price Index has risen 7% over the last 12 months up until the March 2023 quarter. So we're increasing rates by 3.5%. However, it's likely that our costs have gone up 7%. That makes it extremely difficult for us to continue to provide the services that we provided last year. It's quite a challenge for the CEO, and I'm sure she will be up to the task. One of the most significant contributing factors was gas and other fuels. Contributing factors to the increase in CPI was gas and other fuels. That component of CPI went up 14.3%. And we need to look at the use of our fuels, our gas use of blue water in particular, as any further increases will have a significant impact on our budget. And the sooner we wean ourselves off these carbon-based fuels, the better our budget will be. We've already seen that in our actions to reduce emissions to date, where we have spent something like less than $2 million, but we're now saving $250,000, roughly $250,000 each year. So we continue to make money as we move along in terms of, when you look at that in the longer term over the life cycle. So we need to look at that a little bit more closely, particularly at blue water. I'm pleased to see that this draft budget includes a number of major initiatives, such as the Forest Caravan Park, the wastewater system completion. That's a $450,000 job, but it will be particularly pleasing for the forest community to see that work go ahead. Kennet River wetland sediment removal, it's an environmental project. We can't afford to let ourselves pollute Kennet River. We've allocated $120,000 to small hauls renewal programs, which is a great thing. We're updating our critical IT infrastructure. That's not a low-cost item. That's over $200,000, but it's essential we do that. We're allocating $120,000 to the final stage of completion of the Great Ocean Road footpath, which will link the Apollo Bay shopping centre right through to the very large Pisces Caravan Park. And that's been very well received by the coastal community and by campers, of course. We're commencing some feasibility study work to relocate the Apollo Bay Works Depot and use that existing site for affordable housing. So this is an early step. It's only a small step by comparison to what we need to complete that whole project, but we need to undertake that work. And particularly pleasing for me, at long last, we've set aside an amount of $50,000 to rehabilitate the Barham River Paradise Scenic Reserve that seems to have dropped off the radar screen in recent years. It'd be great to see that rehabilitated. The coastal community regard that as the coast botanic gardens, so to speak. So I expect it might even make a difference to our community satisfaction survey. And lastly, I'd just like to say that we now have an exceptionally low level of debt, but I don't think that's a good thing. I think it just means we're not making our money work hard enough, and we're shortchanging our community. Borrowing money allows us to provide infrastructure earlier than would otherwise be possible, and it allows the users of that infrastructure to pay for those services through their rates. So it's a user-pay system. I think it's a smarter use of money rather than trying to save up to build things or to rely on grants. And I think we need to think a little bit more like the private sector in regard to borrowing. We have a very steady and secure income stream, and we can access concessional loans from the state government. But all in all, I'm pleased to recommend that we adopt this draft budget and those remaining fees and charges. Thank you very much. Thank you to the officers who prepared this, because it's a very challenging task and a long task. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Costin. Councillor Hart?
I'd like to reserve, Mayor.
Certainly. Councillor Arnott?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, we've discussed this budget on several occasions just in my short term on council, and we've debated at length the implications of the charges and fee structure, and we've also asked our officers of questions and accepted community feedback from, was it over 30 submissions that Councillor Costin told us about, and I endorse Councillor Costin's comments to date in respect to the budget. Now, all of the discussions and the feedback from the community have fed into this, even if we don't see specific actions, and I think it would be noted that all of those who did put feedback in will get a reply. Council is much more than roads, rates and rubbish. This budget will continue to support our community's growth and well-being, and for that reason I support the budget to do so. I'll challenge anyone else to consider that as an alternative. Maybe they would like to close things like our libraries or our swimming pools or our parks or our gardens or something else, or our OPIS services to the elderly or whatever. We're not just roads, rates and rubbish. As important as they are. I would direct the public to look at page 21 of our public budget document. It lists over 20 items of capital projects in there which will be receiving funding in this budget, and I'd like them to know which one of those they'd like us to delete if they want us to go back to roads, rates and rubbish. The programs in our budget have my support because it's the right thing to do. We'll do our best to see that you have good roads to traverse for commerce, travel to work, shopping, holidays, roads to good sporting, arts, education, health facilities, all of those supporting this community through our budget. We'll be efficient and lean in our operations. We'll make decisions to protect our environment and to reduce our energy costs, all to keep rates to a minimum and give you value for money. And yes, we'll give the removal of rubbish for effective recycling of materials where possible. Councils, like any other business, we rely on our people for our resources for delivery of our services. Our people are our greatest assets. Trucks and graders need drivers, they need designers and engineers for the roads and bridges, they need HR to appoint them to their position, they need people in payroll to make sure everyone gets paid, people to apply for grants that build the harbours, that fix our roads and our bridges, and to build our new public toilets, managers, qualified, experienced, good people that inform and create this budget that we're speaking about tonight, that on behalf of our community expects us to deliver to them. All the things I've spoken of more are our responsibility as councillors and as elected representatives to work proactively with our staff to get the balance right. Unfortunately, we can never have sufficient excess resources to answer all of the requests of residents and ratepayers in one go. We must be financially sustainable. Just as a family must spend within its means of income at home, so must we at council. Those people who have put submissions to council, as I've said, will get feedback personally, and where we can, as been indicated by officers, we will provide other opportunities for them to address their needs outside of the budgetary circumstances. And as I've said, we will address the climate actions as we can, because that's a normal budgetary thing to do and our responsibility. So for all those reasons, I'd like to commend this for council to endorse.
Thanks very much, Councillor Arnott. Any other councillor? Councillor White?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to make mention of the document itself and how it has been presented, and thank the officers for all their work in getting that document together. It's a very complex piece of work, and it takes a lot of thought to put it together in a reader-friendly fashion. And I think we just talked about the inclusion of a number of tables that help demonstrate what we're looking at in the document and help people better understand what we're trying to put out there. So I really do thank the officers for putting the effort into how their document's actually presented. And I would especially encourage the community to look at the CEO and the Mayor's messages in the front of the document that give, yes, Mayor, that was very good, that give a really good overview of where we're at and what we're on about. So I'd like to highlight that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson, did you have your hand up before?
Thank you. I would also like to start by thanking all the people who made submissions to the budget, took the time to read the budget and make a submission, some of them representing themselves, some of them representing groups. And I'd also like to acknowledge the work of the CEO and the executive and the finance teams and all officers that put so much work into this budget, and particularly our former finance manager Amanda Barber, who sort of worked on the budgets and sort of very much worked towards improving the presentation of the budget over the last couple of years. She no longer works for councils for family reasons, has moved on, but she actually did put in a lot of work to this budget. This budget has certainly been a challenging budget with the cost of living pressures, inflation, 7%, and in some areas and materials, like inflation above 7%. I certainly support the rate cap, and the rate cap is pretty much like half of what inflation actually is, the costs of the goods and services that council buys. I think there was a question from the gallery that really sort of sat with me while I was listening, and I haven't quoted it exactly. I might have got it slightly wrong, but it was something around, did council sort of take in consideration people's ability to pay, and sort of commented that the issue council faces is not necessarily what the community faces. And I actually think it's one in the same, because I think, particularly as a councillor, I'm very mindful of the community's ability to pay. And that's why I'm very supportive of rate capping. But that in mind, and we have 30 submissions to this budget, the community is very diverse and community needs have not diminished. This year, they're stronger than ever. The services that the community requires or expects, the projects, it just doesn't stop, and that's the balance and the challenge that council faces. And it's probably never been so hard for us to face those challenges. I think everything that the council does is trying to balance the needs of the community, the wants of the community, and the ability of the community to pay. And I think that's going to be a really big challenge for us going forward. And really, I'd sort of ask, the community and all of us to really, think about, and that's really, in the budget papers, that's really what it talks about, is that we have to be very, take everybody on the journey with us about what council can deliver, where our priorities are, and that's going to be a big challenge for us going forward.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Finnegan, did you wish to say anything?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just want to say, first of all, start off saying thanks to officers and councillors for all the hard work that's been put in to get this document together, and also thank you to the community for your submissions. It's never easy, and raising rates as we have, it impacts everyone, but it's necessary to ensure the effective running of our council and the services our entire community depends on. And I feel we've struck the right balance given the economic challenges we face as a nation, considering inflation's running at about 7%. The budget benefits the entire community with key infrastructure projects on the coast, the Otways, Colac and surrounds the northern parts of our shire, including halls renewal, footpaths, new playgrounds. Speaking of playgrounds, I'm proud, along with our Mayor, Councillor Potter, to have strongly advocated for a $100,000 allocation to the Donaldson Street play space redevelopment. And that's going to ensure that one of the most socially and economically disadvantaged areas of our shire isn't left behind in the spend on new and improved community infrastructure. On top of this, very happy to see $13,000 allocated to see our flags are illuminated at night, meaning we can fly all of them, including the one that's going to be on a new 4th flagpole 24/7. And may I just possibly steal the thunder of Councillor Hart here and say debt-free in 2023, baby.
Thanks for the song and dance, Councillor Finnegan, and thanks for pointing out the allocation of Donaldson Street Playground. Councillor Hart, you reserved?
Yes, thanks, Mayor, and I'll try not to go over everything that everyone else has said, but I would like to thank the people who made submissions to the budget, and I understand that the submission period draws out comments and concerns from the community and priorities, and even though some of them haven't been reflected in the current budget, I think it's important as an organisation that those comments and suggestions aren't lost and are considered as in terms of grants that may become available for some of those projects. I too support rate capping, and I note that this council has a policy that supports rate capping. It's in our policy, and I think that is some attempt to, it's a rough attempt, but it's an attempt to reflect the issue of capacity to pay. In relation to the fee that's been set to zero, I think we need to tease out as part of the local law review whether those permits should be required in the future or how that should be coordinated and whether there should be any such fee. But I think as an interim measure, this has allowed that part of the issue to be addressed. I will, though, I will join Councillor Finnegan in celebrating that council will be debt-free as of tomorrow. And there is a world of difference between a private business borrowing money and a council borrowing money. The private business will borrow money because it can make a financial return on what it's going to do. The returns that council has are quite often social returns. It's not a financial return, and it requires an additional rate burden on council. And council's customers or communities are captive in terms of being ratepayers. They can't go to the council next door if they don't like Colac Otway Shire. If they're in the municipality, they're captive in having to pay money to the Shire. So I think that we have to be very careful of suggesting that we should merely borrow money for the sake of it. Even if we borrow it for a worthwhile project, if it doesn't generate a financial return, it's an extra burden on the ratepayers. And this council's had some capacity constraints in delivering the projects that it already finances. So if you borrow money and just have it sitting in the bank waiting to finance a project that you can't complete, it's quietly a poor thing to do. And I'm not aware of these subsidised loans from the state. Perhaps the CEO can enlighten us, because for all council's debt in the recent past has been with financial institution banks. And just if anyone's not clear, banks are there to maximise their profit. They smile at you when you go in the door, but that's what they're about. So I'd urge some caution on the debt. If you've got a realistic project and perhaps one that has financial savings, well, by all means investigate that. But if you don't have the capacity to deliver it, even if you've got the money, then we need to deliver what we can with the finances we're already allocating. And as I say, there's been some capacity constraints with that. So borrowing money to just stick it in the bank at a lower interest rate is not a good idea.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you everyone for your comments. I think we can see that we have a lively debate on borrowings.
Mr. Mayor, why have we got a right of reply when there's no opposition?
There was no opposition as such. Councillor Hart did speak in opposition to a comment that
He just made a comment.
I'll be very brief.
Well, he just made a comment. I don't think there's a right of reply when there was no opposition.
Yeah.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yes. Go on, Councillor.
If you do read the various things on the relevant provisions, the person who moves a motion has a right to respond to issues that have been raised during debate. It's not dependent on someone saying they're going to vote against the motion. So if there's an issue that Councillor Costin, in this instance, wants to reply to, I think you'll find that they have the right to do that.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. And I understand Councillor Hanson's point and interjection, but that's the way I took it, Councillor Hart, given that you spoke in opposition to what Councillor Costin said. I'll give you a minute or so, Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. At the risk of chopping myself off, I don't think Councillor Hart spoke in opposition. I agree with his point that we need to be very, very careful on borrowings, but we can make strategic use of them where there is an income stream to fund those borrowings. But just again to thank, firstly thank the submitters for their submissions. Although most of those submissions haven't made a material change to the budget, you can be sure that councillors are aware of the issues that have been raised, and that we will consider them in our debates over the next year or so. And thank you again to officers, particularly the managers involved, general managers and CEO. It's not a 9-to-5 job, and there's lots of emails flying around after hours and at weekends as well to try and get this sorted out. So give yourselves a well-earned break for the rest of the day and start again tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Costin. Councillors, I'll put the motion to vote. All those in favour? Thanks, Councillor Hanson. That motion is carried 7-0. Councillors, do you want to have a break or do you want to squeeze one more in? We've been going for 2 hours now. Sorry, CEO, keep going. Yeah, right. We'll have a 2-minute break. Councillors, item 9.7, 2023-24 Annual Plan. The purpose of this report is to present the 2023-24 Annual Plan to Council for endorsement. Do Council have any questions of officers? No questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with a report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? You're looking... well, somebody who... Councillor Finnegan, do you want to move the...
Yes, I'd like to move that one. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
So we're moving the one with the blue writing?
The one that's up on the screen.
Yeah, I'll second that one, yeah.
Councillor Costin did have his hand up. Okay then. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's important that we push a council plan through, but obviously with this amendment here that makes mention, obviously, that we investigate further the electrification of heat pumps and other plants at the Blue Water Leisure Centre, including the exploration of external funding programs. It is something that the community has asked about, and I think it's something that we're important. We take their views on notice and we include it in the council plan.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Yes, I will speak in support of this now, Mayor. I think the key point with the extra item is that we've had various submissions on whether or not there can be a conversion away from gas at Blue Water Fitness Centre. We did get a very general report on this, but some years ago, but I think it could be explored further, whether it might be staged, whether might even be access to grant money or some other source of funds. So this is just bringing it to something that we consider, if we pass this as a council, that needs to be looked at, and it may help to further reduce council's emissions from its operations.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. When I first looked at this, I thought it was a little bit light on, but I know that as time goes on, this sets out what we're going to do for the next 12 months, but there's a series of reporting over time which will allow councillors to keep track of what's happening. So we have the annual report and we have a quarterly performance report which maps our progress against this annual plan. We also have operations reports and capital works reports, financial performance reports, for example. I'm particularly pleased to see the inclusion of an action to, it's just disappeared, to further investigate the electrification of Blue Water. Not just heat pumps, but anywhere else in Blue Water, such as the heating, water heating and other areas as well. It's something that we have looked at before. There was a range of costs provided. We expect that it will save us money. I mentioned before that the price of gas has gone up enormously and we can expect it to go up even more. And we still have exploration for gas going on because the gas producers expect the price of gas will go up enormously also. So we need to move away from gas as much as we can. And we hope that there will be some grants, or we know that there will be some grants becoming available for us to do that. But equally, we could look at borrowings to fund this work as well, because it will actually save us money and we could be using those savings to repay a loan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to speak holistically in support of the motion. I'll note that from that original report, it talked about some costs savings that might be ongoing from some of those programs that's suggested for 600 odd thousand, but the actual return on the equity spend was only about 3%, so it does have a long payoff time at that. So that wasn't particularly viable at that time. That position may have changed. That's what this request is about, by inclusion of that at the end of this motion. So I'll just commend Councillor Costin's and Finnegan's comments on that. But overall, in respect to the annual plan, I think this just shows the level of good governance of reporting back from our executive to council about the planning and operations of council, a document to work towards, and things that we actually have happening and the progress of those for our community. So this keeps the council informed with the regular reporting, as Councillor Costin said, on where those programs are at and what's happening. So yeah, that's the main reason to support the governance value of this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Finnegan, you happy? Councillors, I'll put the motion to vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried 7-0. Councillors, item 9.8, project budget adjustments and cash reserve transfers. The purpose of this report is to prevent the project budget adjustments and cash reserve transfers for council ratification and approval. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
There was one item on there which was the Bruce Street drainage project, which we're not proceeding with. And I wonder if we can get a little bit more detail about, given our discussion on Bruce Street before, why we're not proceeding with this project.
No, through the Mayor, sorry, Councillor Costin, we'll have to take that one on notice because we don't have the detail. The officer who can answer that isn't here.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I mentioned this item coming up when I was talking about the budget, or asked questions about the budget. How is it going to be resolved? What might be done with those unallocated funds? Is it necessary to have an extra clause on the resolution to call for some sort of report?
Whether that's so through the Mayor, whether that's necessary is, I think, up to councillors to decide, but the commitment that officers have given to councillors and the practice that we have introduced to support the commitment is that once council allocates funds to a project or an initiative, not a dollar goes on or off that budget by officers. It only occurs through resolution of council. And so we've introduced a standing item to your monthly agenda where project transfers, such as the ones outlined in this report, can be presented, and then council decides to resolve to approve those changes or not. So for me, I'm very confident that whilst it's nice and transparent perhaps to add a point, regardless it doesn't change the commitment. And as I outlined when we were discussing the budget through the carryover process at end of year, we will carry forward any unallocated funds. They will not be lost to surplus or the bottom line, and council will only allocate those through resolution. If there's an emergency, we might have a discussion and create a budget from those funds and have it ratified at the next possible meeting, but that would be only under emergency circumstances.
Any other questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with a report for our consideration. Councillor Hart.
I'd like to move it, but with the extra bit added, please.
Yes, thank you. I wonder where that went. That's it. Thanks, Councillor Hart. Is there a second to Councillor Costin? Is it to be opposed? Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. Essentially what's happening here, there's various projects that in some cases a project might not be going ahead. In some cases a project's gone ahead and there's been a savings compared to the budget. On the other hand, others have had a slightly higher cost, and I don't propose to start reading through them all in speaking to this resolution. And I think this is a very transparent process that highlights the ins and outs of all of that, if I can put it that way. I touched on this in the context of asking a question about the budget. I think it's important that council will decide how the unallocated funds, which is the net result of these variations, what is done with them. And there's been some discussion in an earlier item about the blue water changeover possibly to electricity. I had a concern, and I still have a concern, that council's not putting enough into new footpaths, and we have strategic footpaths plans for Apollo Bay and for Colac. And when I read this report initially, I was inclined to use the money that wasn't needed for footpath maintenance for footpaths, but I do accept that perhaps that needs to be part of a much more detailed conversation. So what this item is doing and has done, it wasn't always done by this council. You'd come and ask questions, well, what happened to this money or that money? And it was sometimes the answers you got weren't very clear. But this is a very transparent process, and I commend the CEO and the finance people for having this done transparently in a meeting such as this. And I'm sure that when we discuss how those funds might be used, that'll also be in a meeting such as this.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Councillor Costin, did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, it's very pleasing to see these project budget adjustments come before council. It makes the process, the financing of these works more transparent, not only for councillors but for our community. It's pleasing to see that the budgets aren't driving works, that we're actually looking whether the works are needed or not. Often the indicator for officers in charge of these projects is budget execution, so they strive at the very last month to expend all the money they can. And it's pleasing that here we are in the last month of the year and we're looking at savings rather than scrambling to expend those finances. On the other hand, we probably do need to look at budget execution. We do need to make sure that we've got sufficient resources to implement projects that are needed, but where we haven't identified works, it's good to see that we actually are nominating those as savings. There's one there I'll just highlight, and that's the landslip on Tuckshan Road. Unfortunately, landslips are a fact of life in the Otways, and we can expect more and more of them to occur in our changing climate. And this one on Tuckshan Road has a high potential to get worse and cut off access to, I'm not sure, 6 to a dozen properties or so. So it's pleasing to see that we're proposing to actually do some work to maintain those access for those properties in the event that that landslip will cut the road entirely. So thank you, officers, for making this a transparent process, and I support the recommendation as on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Arnott?
I will not repeat all the comments of Councillor Costin and Hart other than to endorse them and to point out again that this is just another example of good governance that the council is adhering to, and I thank the executive for being proactive with this sort of work. And this shows us as a council and the executive, gives us reassurance about our budgeting for projects and when that it's appropriate, because we get the report at the end, have we had the budget the right amount, did we have excess or did we not budget enough? And so this is part of that process that gives us some reassurance. And so where we've got an excess, which is nice, then we can make a decision on what to do with it. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor, I propose to put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried 7-0. Item 9.9, Colac Otway Shire Grants Program 23 to 24, allocation of funds for community grants. Purpose of this report is to consider the proposed allocation of funds through the 2023-2024 Colac Otway Shire Grants Program for community grants. Declarations of conflict of interest in this matter. Councillor Hanson, thank you. And Mr. Surin.
I'll just declare a conflict of interest because of my association with the Colac Basketball Association and also membership of the Colac Football Netball Club, which I did earlier forget to mention.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Mr. Surin.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to declare a general conflict of interest. I too am a member of the Colac Basketball Association and the Colac Football Netball Club, which both groups have submitted applications to the program.
Thank you. See you, Kate. Thank you. Councillors, any questions of officers? No questions. Would someone like to move a motion in relation to this? Councillor Arnott, thank you. Seconder? Councillor White. Is it to be opposed? Thanks. Did you wish to speak to this, Max?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, this is one of those feel-good moments of programs for council that we actually get to assist groups like this. From a council perspective, it's not overall a large expenditure. $180,000 sounds like a lot of money for each one of those groups. It may be a significant assistance to their operations and programs. And we've got things as diverse as computers for use in the UA3 group, whatever. Apollo Bay Football Netball Club, solar panels for $10,000. So there's all different options here. Colac Makers Space, get $988 to assist them. The showgrounds, Let's Talk Colac, the Warren Recreation Reserves, get some upgrade for painting the carpets and some carpets and paintings and lining the walls and locks, whatever. Whatever we can do to assist our community makes our community healthier, engages involvement with our community so that they're not feeling left alone, that council is there to support them. So this is great. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Councillor White, did you wish to speak?
Very briefly to say thank you to all the applicants and putting in the time and effort and energy to apply for the grants, and to the panel also. It must be a really hard task to go through and see that the applications match the criteria, and to reiterate what Max said, the huge range of groups and organisations have applied, and it just adds to the fabric of our community and celebrates who we are. So I'm really pleased to second this recommendation.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. As Councillor Arnott said, this is a feel-good moment to allocate these grants to our community groups, almost $180,000 or just over $180,000 worth of grants. And I know for the community groups it might be a bit of work to submit applications, but the amounts that we are distributing shows it's well worth it, and it puts communities in charge of what they want to see happen in their area. So it empowers the communities, it provides them with funds to do what they want to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Thanks, councillors. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried 6-0. I'll just text Councillor Hanson and ask her to... Oh, it's been done. Thanks. Righto, Councillor Hanson's back. Next item 9.10, Colac Otway Shire Grants Program, allocation of funds for events grants. Purpose of this report is to consider the proposed allocation of funds through the 2023-24 Colac Otway Shire Grants Program for events. Councillors, is there any declarations of conflict of interest? Councillor Finnegan, could you let us know, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have a conflict of interest in relation to my former ownership of the Tea Tree Hotel at Warrion, which is where one event is going to be held. I've declared conflicts throughout this process, so it's only right for me to rule myself out for the final vote as well.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a conflict of interest as a member of the board of Colac Area Health Foundation, the Christmas by a Lake event in 2023.
Thank you. Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a conflict of interest in relation to the items number 21 and 22, which is the Apollo Bay Seafood Festival and the Apollo Bay Winter Wild Festival. Conflict arises because these applications have been auspiced by the Apollo Bay Chamber of Commerce, and they made a disclosable gift towards my election campaign. And Mayor, if I can just raise an issue here, that councillors should only be stepping out for what they have a conflict of interest on, not the whole item.
Yeah, we might look at that in the future, but at the moment the view is out for the item.
Thank you. We need to look at that because if there is debate on a number of other items where a councillor doesn't have a conflict, you're actually denying the right of a councillor to be part of that debate. Having said that, I will step out in this instance. Thank you.
Thank you. But something I'll get some government advice on down the track. Thank you. And I'm lucky. We're lucky that Kate could join us from where she is. So that leaves 4 of us. Are there any questions of officers? No. Sorry? Yeah, no questions. Do I have a mover for the recommendation? Thanks, Councillor White. Seconder? Thanks, Kate. Councillor Hanson. To be opposed? No. Councillor White, did you wish to speak? You don't have to. Thank you. Councillor Hanson?
I'll just briefly just say, and I'm sure it was said in the item before, just how positive the grants program is, and the multiplier effect of these community grants is enormous, and the benefit it brings to our community. And you can see up on the screen some of the fabulous events that we're supporting. And so, you know, we give a fairly modest financial contribution, but the contribution that the community puts in is enormous, and we all get, a huge bonus, and, they're just some fabulous events. So I look forward to attending a lot of them.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Any other councillor? Thank you, councillors. I'll put the motion to vote. All those in favour? Thanks, councillors. That's carried 4-0. Councillors, item 9.11, Colac Otway Shire Grants Program 2023-2024, allocation of funds for business grants. Purpose of this report is to consider the proposed allocation of funds for business grants. Are there any declarations of conflicts of interest? Thank you. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillors, officers have provide a recommendation for this report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Finnegan, thank you. Is that to be seconded? Thanks, Councillor Costin. Is to be opposed? Oh, sorry, Kate. Graham got in first. Councillor Finnegan, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, I'll just be quick here and say, you know, it's as then sort of echoing Councillor Arnott's comments in a previous on a previous item. This is one of those times where what we do is good. You know, these business grants improve the general look. You know, coming under, you know, building facades, updating signage, or moving to around energy efficiency or environmental sustainability, all contribute to the not only the overall you know, good look of our shire and improving upon that, but improving upon our you know, environmental credentials. And I back it. It's really good, and it's something that is consistently you know, well applied for. And congratulations to all people, all businesses who've been awarded a grant, I guess.
Thank you, Councillor Costin. Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor. Whilst I'm not going to speak against the motion, because to do so would be against, I guess, the fact that this is approved by council policy, the business grants, and that all the successful applicants have been approved as a result of that criteria. So good on them, and I support Councillor Finnegan's comments in respect to that. But I will question in the future the appropriateness of this program as a use of council money in respect to supporting businesses in this way, where in some of these cases it actually results in financial benefit to the businesses themselves as a result of granting the money. Now, good on them again, they've got that. There's some environmental outcomes from that, I get that. But then when you look at the total picture, the actual outcome to the businesses, they probably could have bought it themselves out of the savings that they make and the financial outcome. And when you look at some of the businesses, you think, well, you want your business to look good to attract customers, why do you need our support? They're my views. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment, and I was going to put my hand up before Councillor Arnott did. Just like I think Councillor Arnott has made, you know, some very good points, and I think, you know, through some of these grant programs, I think, you know, we're constantly reviewing them and, you know, getting feedback and, you know, just make some tweaks and some changes. But sometimes what the grants have done, and particularly around the community facade program, is we've sort of responded to community concerns. And I think, you know, over many years, like we sort of received, you know, community feedback about the looks of, you know, some shops looking a bit tired in our streets and in our towns. And is there a way that we could sort of encourage people to, you know, to sort of put some money into, you know, sprucing up the looks of our, you know, the look of their premises. And, you know, I know sometimes it can be pretty tough in businesses. Some, you know, businesses do better than others, and that, you know, it can be a little bit, a community grant or that little bit of that incentive to get you to across the line to actually spending the money needed to improve, you know, your shop front, is what this grant was about. So these businesses have to spend, you know, a lot more than the grant that they're awarded. But I think over the years we've had some very positive results with some facades, you know, in our towns, you know, being much improved. So I think that side of the grants is very much, you know, very much achieved, you know, what the community wanted us to achieve through it. So, but I think it's always worth reviewing grants and tweaking them and adjusting them where needed.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Any other councillor? Councillor Finnegan, you happy? Thank you. Councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. It's carried 7-0. Councillors, item 9.12, Part Road Closure, Hall Street, Cressy. Purpose of this report is to seek council to finalise the discontinuance of the part of Hall Street that encroaches on private freehold title certificate volume 12427, folio 485. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. In relation to the road closure, or more so the road next door, the proposal is to create, if you like, two dead-end roads, particularly the one to the south will be partly on the reserve. And there was also a submission that suggested that there was a need to have continuous access. Would the reserve that council has, how wide is it? And would that be the entire area, entire width be needed for if there was a laneway or something like that? Has council looked into that, or would that perhaps be better as a separate process?
Mr Teddy.
Through you, Mayor, we haven't looked into that as yet, and it probably would be another process, a separate process that we go through.
Any other questions of officers? CFA. Councillors, officers have provided a recommendation with this report. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'd like to basically move the recommendation, and I know there has been some discussion on the reserve land, and I'm just looking at point 6. If you can just give me a moment, please. I just wonder if rather than is, in point 6 it should be maybe, that may be surplus. In which case I'm happy to move it if it was maybe.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Is there a second to Councillor Arnott? Is it to be opposed? Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This particular road, the section that council is closing if this is passed, is on private property, so I don't really see in a practical or legal sense how we can not close a section of road that is found to be on private property. As part of the submissions, there's been some suggestions that there needs to be through access, such as for emergency services, and there is a reserve section of land that could possibly be used for that purpose, or perhaps some of it could be used for that purpose and some of it might be surplus to council's requirements. You'd really need to see how wide that access would need to be and how wide the block is, whether you need to subdivide parts off. I think they're things that do need to be looked at. And I know there were some concerns about having effectively a dead-end street. I understand the longer part of the dead-end street, if I can call it that, if this road's closed, is, I was told, about 162 metres. I roughly worked it out at 200 metres on Google Maps, and I'm not going to get an argument over which ones, it's something around that order. It's actually shorter than the dead-end road that will be created as part of the Bruce Street subdivision that we passed earlier today. And it services approximately 10 or 11 lots, which is obviously important, but having a dead-end road or no-through road that's that short is not uncommon. That said, I come back to, we can hardly not close a section of road that's on someone's private property, and I think we need to get some sort of report as to the future options of the reserve, whether that means some of it's used for a laneway, whether it means it is surplus to council's requirements. And that's why I've asked that there be that extra point that's in there in blue.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor Arnott, did you wish to speak?
I could reserve, thank you.
Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate Councillor Hart's input on this matter, and I do agree that with the alignment of this particular street being on private property, I do agree that it makes good sense to close. However, in light of the submissions of the community, and particularly in the submissions of the CFA, the local CFA captain, my firm belief is that we shouldn't be closing it without having an alternative open along that road reserve. So whether it be knocking down some trees or something like that, so at least there's the access to create a through road. And I know Councillor White doesn't particularly appreciate my thinking about knocking down those trees, but the reality is that coming into fire season, we know how bad fires can be, particularly out on the plains. You know, I'm just really, really uncomfortable with closing this part of Hall Street at this time, given what we know can happen out there, and without having the access for a through road, particularly for a truck to go through and around if required. Now, I would prefer to see it, at the end of the day, I don't particularly mind about the current alignment being closed. I'll just prefer that at the time we do it, that there's a new alignment ready to go. I don't really think closing it before there's a new alignment is the right way to do it, and that's why I'm voting against it.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Any other councillor? Councillor Arnott, you reserve.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'd support the road closure. Like Councillor Hart said, this is on private property. I don't see how we could not support that on that basis. I think the owners of that property have been very, very patient and been actually quite proactive in working with the community to get an understanding about the fact that this is their land, that the road's there just by historic significance, being an easy access to the front of the past pub. There's a private residence now, that the road goes right past their front door, or the supposed road. It is really their driveway in reality that goes past their front door. And they've done the right thing to have this building that they have now got private ownership of been sensitively renovated to keep its historic past its historic look intact. So I think we need to support them in that process, and they've already put forward a proposal to council where they're going to fix up the vegetation and clean up the area once the road is enclosed. So I think that that's a really good reason to proceed. As far as access for emergency vehicles, as Councillor Hart said, the other closed street is Tennant Street. That part of it's not going to be significantly long, and summertime, if there was a grass fire, which has been some of the concerns, CFA and others through there, most of those lots are empty. Truck could go ploughing through there without any problem whatsoever, or worst case scenario, we could chop one tree down, sorry Marg, down the end of that lane, and they would be able to get through. And you're talking summertime, so they don't need it sealed to do that. The ground would be hard. So anyway, I support the motion.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Hart, right to reply.
Yes, I will take that. Thanks, Mayor. And I'll just build on some of the comments that Councillor Arnott made. And it was, I was in a discussion with a resident recently where there was had been a grass fire in near the Birregurra area, and the comment was made just in the discussion how the CFA they cut fences and just drive across the paddock, which is quite appropriate, quite understood. But the point being that there's plenty of, in that sort of emergency situation, there would be plenty of access.
Thank you. Councillors, I'll call for a vote on the motion. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. The motion is carried 6-1. Division is called. Councillors, all those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor White, Councillor Hart, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Potter. Against? Councillor Finnegan. Councillors, item 9.13. Pretty excited to see this one. Contract 2310, supply and delivery of a street sweeper. Purpose of this report is to award contract 2310, supply and delivery of street sweeper. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Arnott and I went to a local government conference in Canberra recently, and at the exhibitors marquee beside the conference centre was a lot of electric vehicles, electric motors, electric trucks and whatever. I'm just wondering whether we considered a battery electric street sweeper in this instance, or was it possible for someone who had one to propose that vehicle in response to the tender?
Thank you. They're drawing straws down there. Mr. Siren's got his light on.
Well, through the Mayor, we're able to provide a response. We've been asked that question, and so we have one prepared. And it was considered and it was deemed to be not suitable, so it wasn't put to market in that way. We would love to think that in the future they're more viable alternatives. Yep.
I have a question. If this is approved, will the street sweeper be in our corporate colours of white, or are there other colours available? White, okay. Well, it's going to. Councillor Finnegan, have a question?
My understanding is this is going to double as a new mayoral vehicle, so...
Councillor Arnott.
Just for the purposes of our ratepayers, can one of the officers please explain the process that was employed to achieve this outcome?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. So this street sweeper replacement is part of our long-term heavy fleet replacement program. As the vehicle comes up for replacement, the specifications are developed. We benchmark those against what's available in the market and then it goes to market and it's procured through our procurement team. And what you've got in front of you is an assessment of that procurement process.
Just basically trying to give reassurance to our ratepayers that we go through a value process to make sure that we get the best outcome for their money.
Yeah, like all our procurement processes, they go through that rigour to ensure we get value for money and get the right products and equipment.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillors' officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Thanks, Councillor Arnott. And seconded, Councillor Costin. Is the bill opposed? Councillor Arnott, did you want to talk to it?
I think we pretty much covered it. We do need, other than to say we do need one of those things, we want our community to continue to look appropriately presented and cleaned. Streets, the gutters unblocked and all of those sorts of things. You see it go around the towns, and without it we'd be a mess. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything, Councillor Costin? Thank you. Councillors, I propose to put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion's carried 7-0. Item 9.14, Contract 2306, Planning Consultancy Panel Tender. The purpose of this report is to award contracts to a panel for planning consultants following a tender for the provision of planning consultancy service to the council. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Perhaps if I just ask why we need consultants, and is it because we can't find the right staff to employ full-time to work with us and we need consultants?
Mr McNeil.
Through you, Mayor, there's a range of reasons why Council needs to engage planning consultants from time to time. One of them is that we undertake strategic planning projects that require specific expertise that Council doesn't have in-house. There's times where we require contract planners to come in and provide overload workload assistance for us when there's times of high permit activity, or it might be times where we've got vacancies or we need assistance to represent council at VCAT. There's quite a number of circumstances where it's appropriate that we engage a consultant planner, and this panel provides us the opportunity to look at what that particular expertise expertise is, and know that we can engage a suitable planner at a cost that's of good value to council when we need them.
Any other questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a report, a recommendation with this report. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Is there a seconder? Councillor Finnegan, thank you. Is to be opposed? Councillor Arnott, did you wish to talk to it?
I think this is just one of those necessary things which must be done to support the operations of council. If people want to put an application in for a building or planning permit, then they need support.
Thank you. Councillor Finnegan, did you wish to say anything? Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. It's carried 7-0. Item 9.15, Community Asset Committee's appointment of new members to URAC Public Hall and Tennis Reserve. The purpose of this report is for Council to appoint new members to the URAC Public Hall and Tennis Reserve Community Asset Committee. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with a report for our consideration. Any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Thank you, Councillor Hart. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor White. Is to be opposed? Councillor Hart, did you wish to speak?
I'd just like to thank the people who have put themselves forward to be on this particular committee. Facilities such as these are only able to continue to function and be available because there's people who are prepared to do the committee duties associated with those.
Thank you, Councillor White. Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried 7-0. Item 9.16, Ordinary Risk Committee meeting, unconfirmed minutes, 17th of May 2023. Purpose of this report is to provide for information the Colac Otway Shire Audit and Risk Committee unconfirmed minutes dated 17th of May 2023. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No questions. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Seconded, Councillor White. Is that what you're telling me? Cool. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Arnott, did you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, reading through these minutes, it's actually reassuring to see that the Risk and Audit Committee covers so much on behalf of council to keep their eye on the operations behind the scene, to make sure that their risks are covered, to make sure the auditors are keeping on top of things from the finance perspective of the operations of council. So in that context, I thank them for their work, those who are on the committee, the officers and the councillors, and commend the report.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Councillor White, did you wish to speak? No. Any other councillor? Thanks, councillors. I'll put the motion to vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried 7-0. Councillors, the next item is just for noting, report of informal meetings of councillors. So thank you, councillors. Big meeting. Worked well together. Thanks for joining us, Kate. Enjoy the rest of your break. And that concludes the meeting.
Thank you.